When my father died, I thought the worst pain was losing him. I didn't know the real pain would come from the people still alive. My name is Corinne Ellis, 34 years old, and the day we buried my father, a part of me was buried too. My stepmother, Vivian, stood beside me with fake tears and designer sunglasses. My half-sister, Lila, clung to her arm, pretending to be heartbroken. But deep down, I could feel it, they were relieved. My father's will was the only thing standing between them and the fortune he built. After the funeral, Vivian hosted a family gathering. I wasn't invited to speak during the ceremony, but she made sure to toast with champagne that night. She smiled at me and said, "Your father loved you, Corinne. I'm sure he left you something meaningful." The way she said meaningful felt sharp, almost mocking. The will was to be read the next morning. I held on to the belief that my father's love would protect me, even from them. The lawyer arrived early. Vivian and Lila were already seated when I walked in. "Let's begin," Vivian said, crossing her legs. My father had left his entire estate, the company, the house, and nearly every asset, to Vivian, for the management and benefit of the family. My name appeared only once, a single life insurance policy worth barely enough to cover my apartment rent for a few months. I sat there, frozen. "It must be a mistake," I whispered. The lawyer looked uncomfortable. Lila smirked. "Guess Dad thought Mom could handle things better." I couldn't breathe. I had given up my career to help my father manage his company when he got sick. I was the one who stayed up all night organizing files, paying bills, and managing appointments. Vivian only showed up for photo ops, and Lila was too busy chasing luxury parties. My throat burned as I walked out. Vivian followed me to the driveway. "You should move on, dear. You've always been sentimental." That word stung more than a slap. I rented a small apartment across town. My fiancé, Daniel, tried to comfort me. "We'll build our own life," he said. But weeks later, he started acting distant. Calls went unanswered, dinners cancelled. I tried to believe it was stress from work, until the night I saw him on social media, smiling beside Lila at a charity gala. My sister, wearing the same necklace I once wore on my engagement night. My stomach dropped. I drove to his apartment. His car was there. The lights were on. When I knocked, Lila opened the door in one of his shirts. "Corinne," she said, fake shock dripping from her voice. Daniel appeared behind her, frozen like a thief caught red-handed. My heart pounded. "How could you?" I asked. Lila laughed softly. "You were always so serious, Corinne. Daniel deserves someone fun." I left before my tears could fall. That night, I packed the last of my things and swore never to cry for them again. The months that followed were brutal. I sold my car to pay rent. I took freelance marketing jobs just to survive. Vivian sold my father's company and rebranded it under her name. I tried to move on, but every headline with her face reminded me how powerless I'd become. Until one morning, I found an old file on my backup drive, financial reports I had compiled for my father during his illness. Inside were hidden records, and something strange. There were large transfers made from my father's personal account to a private offshore fund, managed by Vivian. My father's signature was shaky, inconsistent. My heart raced. Could it be forgery? I printed everything. For the first time in months, I felt alive again. My father wasn't careless. Someone had played him while he was sick. I decided to dig deeper. I visited his former accountant, Mr. Monroe, pretending to need documents for family archives. When I showed him the transfers, his face turned pale. "Corinne, your father never approved those. Vivian brought those papers after he was hospitalized." My chest tightened. He handed me copies of the original authorization forms. The signatures didn't match. I thanked him and left, my hands shaking. I finally had proof. But I knew I needed more. Vivian was too powerful to take down with suspicion alone. I reached out to an old friend, Claire, an investigative journalist. "You want to expose your stepmother?" she asked. "She runs charity foundations and sponsors half the city." I nodded. "That's exactly why I have to." Claire agreed to help me discreetly. We began collecting evidence, witnesses, transaction records, even emails between Vivian and the notary who approved the forged documents. Weeks turned into months. During that time, I transformed. The fragile woman who once cried in silence was gone. I woke up early, went running, learned new skills, and took control of my life again. The pain that once drowned me had turned into fuel. I started consulting for small businesses, the same kind of people Vivian's greed had destroyed. Slowly, money began coming in. I could finally breathe again. Then came the twist I didn't expect. Daniel and Lila got engaged. Their announcement flooded social media. Vivian called it a union of love and family. I wanted to scream. But instead, I smiled. Because I was no longer the woman they had betrayed. I was the storm they couldn't predict. Claire helped me connect with a lawyer who specialized in corporate fraud. We built a quiet but solid case. I stayed silent on social media, posting only positivity. Meanwhile, we tracked Vivian's shell companies and traced how she had laundered my father's money through fake charities. It was all there, paper trails that could burn her empire to ashes. The wedding was set for June. I received an invitation. It was addressed to Corinne, with love. The irony almost made me laugh. I decided to attend. Not as a victim, but as a revelation. I chose a black dress, elegant, sharp, and powerful. The day of the wedding, I stood at the back of the hall, watching Lila walk down the aisle. Daniel looked nervous. Vivian glowed with pride. They had no idea their perfect world was about to collapse. During the reception, Claire and I executed our plan. She had arranged for her media team to release a story at exactly 8 p.m. The headline read, "Charity Queen Vivian Ellis under investigation for fraud and forgery." Photos of documents, accounts, and witnesses filled the screen. Gasps echoed across the hall as guests checked their phones. Vivian's smile froze mid-sentence. I walked toward her calmly. "You thought you buried me," I whispered, "but I was the seed that grew back stronger." Lila turned pale. Daniel stammered, "Corinne, what did you do?" I looked at him. The truth. Something you never dared to face. Vivian tried to maintain her composure, but reporters were already calling. Her investors began withdrawing. Within days, her empire started crumbling. Lila tried to reach me that night, calling non-stop. I didn't answer. When she showed up at my apartment crying, I opened the door but said nothing. I didn't know she forged the papers, she pleaded. I met her eyes. "You didn't care either." She left in silence. For once, she didn't have a comeback. The next few weeks were chaos for them. Vivian's charity licenses were suspended. Her accounts were frozen. She faced criminal charges for fraud and falsification of documents. I didn't celebrate publicly, I just watched quietly as the truth did its work. Daniel lost his job at one of her companies and disappeared from the city. Karma had perfect timing. I focused on rebuilding my father's legacy. With the help of Claire and the lawyer, I reclaimed part of his assets through the courts. It wasn't easy, but it was justice. I used the recovered funds to start a small foundation, the Ellis Growth Project, supporting young women in business. It was everything my father would have wanted. One morning, I received a letter from Vivian's lawyer. She wanted to settle privately. I declined. Some lessons must be learned publicly. She eventually pleaded guilty, and the story became headline news. I wasn't mentioned by name, but people knew. Sometimes silence speaks louder than revenge speeches. Months later, Lila showed up again, this time humble. She was broke and alone. "Corinne," she whispered, "I don't expect forgiveness, but, can we start over?" I studied her face. For the first time, I saw fear, not arrogance. Maybe one day, I said. But first, learn what it means to lose everything and still stand. I bought a small house near the ocean. The view reminded me of my father, calm, endless, resilient. I decorated it with his old books and framed one of his quotes: "Strength isn't about never falling, it's about rising each time you do." Every morning, I looked at it and smiled. The woman I was before had died, but something new had grown in her place. Claire's article won an award months later. She called me, laughing. "You're the reason I believe in stories again." I thanked her. "No," I said, "my stepmother is the reason. I just refused to let her write the ending." We both laughed. That night, I opened my journal and wrote, "I was never buried, I was planted." One afternoon, I ran into Daniel at a grocery store. He looked older, tired, defeated. "Corinne," he murmured, "I'm sorry. You didn't deserve what I did." I nodded, but my heart felt no anger. "You're right," I said. "But thank you, you taught me to never build my worth on someone else's love." I walked away, lighter than I'd ever felt. Now, when people ask how I survived betrayal, I tell them the truth. They thought they buried me, but I was the seed that grew back stronger. Pain didn't destroy me, it watered my roots. I learned that revenge doesn't always mean destruction. Sometimes it's simply living better, louder, and freer. And as the sun sets over my father's ocean, I whisper to the wind, "Thank you for burying me, because that's where my rebirth began." When life tries to bury you, remember, you are not dirt, you are soil. Everything meant to break you can become the ground that grows your strength. Seedling.